Hello, welcome to another Paranormal Peep show with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and fellow presenter Andy Chaplin. Hi Andy, how are you?
Hi folks, yeah, pretty good. How are you, Neil?
I'm alright. I'm actually here today in the Orkney Islands, which is the north of Scotland, for those who don't know. I'm actually visiting my son and daughter for the Easter break, so that's really nice to get away and see them. So I'm tucked away here in a very, very quiet corner of their house, and I'm chatting to you. So hopefully the signal's good for Skype, being this far away from usual. But obviously we seem to talk to fairly well with people in the US and everything, with very little issues. So fingers crossed, they got a good broadband connection here. It's a BT Infinity or something, whatever they call it. So
it's not steam driven then up there.
Not steam driven. No, actually they got quite a good broadband service up here because for communities on the edge, as they call it, on the edge of Britain, they seem to plough a lot more money into them. And I believe that the Shetland Islands and the Orkney Islands are the ones that get the most money given to them from the British government, rather than any other kind of UK town or county. So,
that's strange because I'm right outside London and my internet connection is slow.
Yeah. You see, because they think they're suffering up here, so they give them much more money. So
yeah, is your cottage where you're staying haunted? Any kind of creaks and moans?
No, that's an assumption. It's a cottage. It's not a cottage. It's actually it's a bungalow.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. And
is it a haunted bungalow?
No, it's on an old people's estate. It used to be lived in by an old person. I don't know if they still live here in some spiritual form or not, but there's an old people's home right nearby. Maybe quite a few spooks could be in there. You never know.
Neil, what you need to do, you need to buy yourself a Grim Reaper outfit and just stand outside their window, just looking in.
That reminds me. Years ago as a kid, actually, we had this Dracula outfit, and me and my friends actually went up to the window of an old people's house, and he was staring in there, sort of waving his Dracula cape and fangs, looking in right through the window. I was cracking up. It's just come back to me. Yeah, the little sods that we used to be as kids. Anyway, talking of our obviously own paranormal experiences and joking, we have actually a guest of ours, Leigh Thatcher, who is a paranormal experiencer and researcher and also an author. And he's got quite a few different paranormal experiences in different kind of areas, which is going to hopefully make a very interesting chat today. So, Leigh Thatcher, welcome very much to the Paranormal Peep Show.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to Andy and yourself.
How are you?
Hi, Leigh.
How are you today, Leigh?
How am I? I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. I've got a cup of coffee in front of me, so I'm good to go.
Good stuff. Okay, so Leigh, you've obviously been down to our paranormal High Wycombe moot in Buckinghamshire a few times, and you've actually given a presentation there, a couple of presentations there, and you also do presentations around the Birmingham area where you live. How did you kind of get involved in the paranormal field?
Right. Well, I'd like to go back to when I was born. However, a lot of my sort of information, if you like, I think is pointing me in the direction that my experiences started before I was born, but with my family, if you like. So a lot of the things that have happened to me almost have run in the family, and to some degree still do. So my sort of first, actually, let me go back to what you said before about being a paranormal experiencer. It's more UFO and stroke paranormal experiencer, if you like. So I guess the first experience that I had was when I was born. So my parents would often talk about these black balls of mist that would dart across the room. I was actually born in Addington and moved up here to Birmingham in 1990, but 1975 I was born, so that gives you an idea of how old I am. So the first sort of understanding of the paranormal that I had was with my parents talking about these black balls of mist that would dart across the room, and objects that would go missing, and I had a cutlery set, a christening set, that would frequently go missing and would turn up on top of the cutlery set in the drawer weeks later. Nobody knew where it had gone. Nobody knew how it got back to where it was put in the first place. And So recently, I was speaking to my mum about different things that used to go on when I was a kid, and she recounted some other stories that I didn't actually know about, that were of almost like paranormal poltergeist, activity in the house. And it wasn't a particularly old house. I think it was. Addington was built, I think, after the Second World War, to accommodate Croydon's overspill of people, something like that. So it's not a particularly old place. So, like I say, so she told me these stories recently, that of objects that would be thrown across the room during the night, bleach that would be thrown down the stairs, food that was strewn across the place, and they'd wake up in the morning, my mum and dad, and there'd be all this carnage everywhere, and they'd obviously have to clear it up. And my older brother and sister at the time were toddlers, and there was no way that they could have done this, and they got into trouble for it. However, so there was a lot of odd things that used to carry on there, and so I grew up in and around sort of Croydon. We moved quite a bit, and so by the time I was 7, I think, my parents split up, and we'd moved around, and nothing untoward had happened paranormal wise, but I always remembered these stories of what my parents had spoke about, these black balls of mist and whatnot. And my mum and dad, they split up in about 82, 83. And my mum then met up with this guy whose his son was best friends with my older brother. So at the time they were about 16, 17. So the father of the guy who my mum met, if that makes any sense, was in the military. He was he'd come out of the Marines. He was a dog handler in the army. He'd done army training, so he's very well into all that sort of thing. So he had quite a military sort of background. So this sort of brings us up to about 1985. So we'd lived with them. We moved in with this guy and his son. So, and my mum and the guy married. His name was Brian, by the way. So my mum and Brian married, and there, so we had me and my older brother and sister, and Brian's only son. So we're all living in the house together. And then one by one, my older brother moved out, my sister moved out, and it was just me and Brian's son, Darren. So Darren would have been about 18 by now. This is about 1985. And this brings us up to my first UFO encounter. So we were out cycling one afternoon. It was we were going past Ashburton Park. Ashburton Plainfield. And like I say, 1985, late afternoon. Now Darren was, like I say, his father Brian was in the military, so there was a lot of military talk in the house. There was a lot of understanding of military aircraft, tanks, all sorts of military stuff. So he knew what the difference between a helicopter, a plane, a military helicopter, all that sort of stuff. So we were cycling, and we stopped because he'd noticed something in the sky, and it was just a white ball of light, nothing untoward. You know, I was 10, so I didn't really think much of it, but he wanted to stop and look. So we were both watching this light in the sky. And it was joined by another light. Another light came along, and another light came along, and then two other lights. So before long, this object, for want of a better word, turned into like a diamond shape. So there was like a white light in the middle, and then four lights around the edge, which made it look like a diamond. And we were watching it for a while, and then gradually this object just moved down from behind the horizon, behind the trees. You couldn't see anything more, and that was it. And I really didn't have much of an understanding of UFOs or any sort of spooky, paranormal, anything like that. But anyway, it struck a chord in me. So we cycled home, told our parents. They weren't interested at all. You know, they sort of dismissed it. And that was it. So I'd had my first UFO encounter at the age of 10. It was a few weeks later after that, I began having quite extreme nightmares. And again, at the time, didn't put two and two together. But the nightmare was I'd be lying on a table in a bright white room, and I would be surrounded by what I called the little workers. And I knew they were talking, but I couldn't hear them talking, but I knew that they were communicating. And I'm sort of recounting this as I would a 10-year-old boy. I mean, nowadays you would say, you know, they were communicating telepathically, if you like, but they were communicating nonetheless.
Do you
yeah,
think,
go on.
I was going to say the little people, the beings, or whatever you're saying. Do you think, in hindsight, they might have been connected, perhaps, with the sighting that you had on the bike with the objects?
Well, at the time, I didn't put two and two together. But like I say, I'd be on the table. I'd have the little workers around me, and then a machine, which I called a conveyor belt of words. And what it was a machine that would come towards me with a line of they weren't words and they weren't numbers. I can only describe them as symbols. So the machine would come towards me, symbols on this machine, and then I'd wake up. Now, I had this reoccurring nightmare a number of times, and the last time I had it, I remember waking up, jumping out of bed, and running down the hallway. It was in the middle of the night. Run down the hallway, and I remember turning around, and in my head thinking, "I hope they don't come for me again." And that was that. Years later, I went to a UFO conference when I moved to Birmingham, and I saw Stanton T. Friedman, who else? Tony Dodd. And Tony Dodd was a UFO researcher at the time, and he started talking about different people's accounts that he'd worked with, and they were almost identical to mine. And that's the only time that I stopped and I thought, well, hold on, maybe there is a link between the sighting and this nightmare that I had. And so to answer your question, yes, I think there may have been some kind of link, if you like.
That's interesting. Andy, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, actually, I need to tell people about my first ever light anomaly, which was last week. It's interesting, and it's very similar to what Leigh is talking about, actually. Now, I've obviously been into the ghost and the UFO subject for quite a long time, but I've never claimed to have seen a UFO as such, and I don't really kind of like I don't think I've seen proper UFO light anomalies. Now I do a lot of night walking. I kind of, there's a nature reserve near me, and I've no qualms about going, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night and wandering around. And I'm quite used to seeing planes, and I'm quite used to seeing things like the International Space Station going past and things burning up in the atmosphere. So I can pretty much identify those types of things. This one was a really weird one. So I was walking along and I looked up and I just saw like a white flash of light. And it wasn't kind of like a flash as in a strobe. It was kind of, it turned on and then turned off. And it was as if somebody was turning on and off a white LED torch. Now, this was way up in the atmosphere and high above all of the planes circling, because I do live near Stansted, and also quite nearby is Luton and Heathrow. So I'm well used to seeing planes, and the planes typically have white tips on the end of the wings, and kind of like red and green lights as well, and sometimes a white strobe and a red strobe. So I know what a plane looks like, and even in the distance you can identify a plane. This was not that. This white light kind of was pure white, and plain white lights tend to be kind of like a yellow dim type colour. So this was pure white. It turned on, turned off, and it was quite big as well. And I kind of averted my eyes because I wasn't expecting it, and I was thinking, that's really strange. I wonder what that was. And I looked up again in the same spot, and it did it again. It turned on, then turned off, and then I just carried on walking. I wasn't really scared, but a little bit kind of, I was thinking about what it could be logically. It couldn't have been anything burning up in the atmosphere, because that would have had a streak, and they tend to kind of like go dim and then really bright as it burns up, and then dim again, and then it kind of like, you have the little tail, like a comet tail. And this wasn't that. What I saw was completely static. It just kind of like turned on, turned off, turned on, turned off. So out of interest, Leigh, when you saw your globes, how big would you kind of say they were, and did they turn on and off as well? What you saw?
What I saw, they didn't turn off and on. They were, I mean, I'm thinking back to 85, so it's what 32 years ago. What I can remember is that they were, I think it was about a 45-degree angle in the sky. I think that might be right. Very high up, probably around about how low a plane would be, so just below the clouds.
And then they assembled together as kind of one unit from different objects. Yeah.
But as I say, at the time, it didn't phase us. We didn't think too much about it. But over the years, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, talking to other people and doing more and more research, I find that this kind of assembly of lights is actually quite, not necessarily common, but it's not unheard of. There's many people that have seen something similar, where they're lights joining together.
I've seen examples of it on various YouTube videos. I mean, there's obviously a lot of fakery stuff out there, which we can talk about later on, CGI and whatnot.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah. But I've obviously heard of cases, written accounts in various books, and you obviously mentioned that you went to the UFO conference with Stanton Friedman and Tony Dodd. Todd? Is that
Tony Dodd?
Tony Dodd. He was a former policeman, if I recollect, or.
I think so. Yeah. This was about 94, I think 95, that sort of time.
And so, what accounts had he said that kind of rung a bell with you? Can you recall those?
No, I can't remember much of that at all. It was no, I can't. I can't even think. I can't even pretend to remember.
So, but it obviously struck a chord that you must have had something akin to what he was describing of other people then.
Oh yeah. Well, at the end, he did actually say, because I think he did regression work as well, and he did at the end say, if there's anybody that wants to, get in touch and have some sessions, regression sessions and stuff like that. And at the time, I was a bit like, oh, do I? Don't I? And I left it, and I thought, no, it's not for me. I'm happy leaving it where it is. But at the time as well, I'd also bought a book by David M. Jacobs called Secret Life, which detailed a lot of He's, I think he's still alive, an American regression therapist for UFO abductions, and he, like I say, in his book, still Secret Life. Again, there's almost like a tick chart of events that happen that lead up to a sighting, and then the subsequent nightmares, the memory recollection of things that could possibly have happened. Because the thing is, when you're dealing with memory and dreams and things like that, you don't know if they're just dreams or not, or if you are recounting something that actually happened. So it's a bit of a grey area.
So you obviously did proceed with that, but is that it sounds like something you regretted, really?
What, not going along with it?
Yeah.
To a point, yeah. I mean, being older now and a bit wiser, I think, there's still, I still have the opportunity to do that. I mean, I know certain people that that is their job. So it's not out of the realms of possibility to do that now. Whether you can pick up on, the actual events of the dream 30 odd years on, I'm not quite sure. I don't know how it works, to be quite honest with you.
I've had regression about 25 years ago now, with a local hypnotherapist, and I found, and I can't say this is for everybody, and I think it's like, because everyone's got a different makeup, I suppose, to a certain extent we're all very similar, but also we're also very, very different in our psyches and how we deal with dreams and all sorts of things. And I found that the level of trance I was going into, and I certainly didn't doubt his ability, but I found that really I was possibly making up a story to please him. And I actually read later on that a lot of people that are regressed are doing that in an effort to kind of comply, if you like. It's a bit,
Okay.
It's a bit like peer pressure.
Neil, were you consciously aware that you were kind of making up the story to please him, or were you kind of like almost it just blurted out kind of thing?
I saw images in my mind. Now, being an artist and a musician, I'm obviously very kind of imaginative, I suppose some people would say, and I suppose it's not too hard for me to conjure up kind of scenarios and stories in my head. And I would suggest that the images, as he was suggesting, what do you see? And I suddenly said, I can see myself as a cowboy, or someone in, I think it was like a more of a, I can't remember the scenario now, it was like a one of those fort things where you're in the American, an American soldier type of thing, but in the times of the cowboys and Indians, with a fort thing, and it was Native American Indians or Red Indians, as I probably called them in the regression. And I can't remember the whole scenario, but I did kind of feel that it was going along to a certain extent. I was saying things, and it all kind of made a sense at the time. But when I thought about it later on, I did have a very kind of strong feeling that it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like, wow, I've discovered something about myself. It felt like it was almost like a plaster to put over a problem that, it really wasn't solving the problem, and it really wasn't a genuine healing as such. Like a plaster doesn't really heal you. It's your own body's natural defences. The plaster's there just to protect it. And I think that this was a psychological plaster of sorts that I was making up.
I was going to say, I think that's partly my problem with not wanting to go along with it now. Because I know an awful lot now. I've obviously researched a lot about abduction and aliens and UFOs and this, that, and the other. How much of what I've read will actually be absorbed into any possible regression? And also, if you get the wrong regression therapist, and they're not very good, what do? Do you go on to the next one? And then the next one, where do you draw the line with knowing, what was a good sort of therapy session and what wasn't?
It's always going to be a kind of an area that it's like going along to see a doctor. Do you keep changing doctors,
Well,
isn't it?
yeah. Well, I was gonna say I'd liken it to going to see a medium. You know, if you go and see a
Yes.
medium,
Yeah.
and you're left thinking, well, you know, that was right, and that was sort of right, and I know I'll go along to another one, and then somebody will recommend somebody to, and then you go along to. So eventually, it could get to the point where you're almost looking for answers. You're looking for something.
Yeah.
When actually something may not actually be there.
I find in my own experience, and Andy obviously is a medium that goes out there and does his public demonstrations. In my experience personally of seeing mediums, I find that I might see, say, 10 in a year, and only find that 2 of them are very, very good, and the rest are kind of a bit mediocre. And I think it's probably the same with the skills of hypnotism and things like that. That I guess a lot of it would come down to personal recommendation of who you go for.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I completely agree.
So where did you go from there then? Once you kind of found parallels with your experiences to other people's in the conference that you went to?
Well, what happened was I'm sort of jumping the gun a little bit here, but when I was 15, I moved from London to Birmingham. The relationship with my mum and Brian, that all sort of fizzled out, and she wanted a new start, so we moved to Birmingham. Just quickly, one of the things that I was expected to do growing up was go to church, which a lot of people are. Well, a lot of people were back then. But yeah, I had to go to church and, you know, go through the rigmarole of Sunday school and all that sort of thing. Wasn't interested at all. However, it did spark a bit of an interest from a historical point of view and a ufology point of view, because there were little things that I was reading in books that I was getting from the library at the time. We lived with my nan and granddad for a couple of years, so I used to pinch her library card and go and get about 10 paranormal books, and so that sort of sparked the whole sort of religion thing, sparked a bit of an interest with UFOs and stuff like that. But that kind of came about more and more as I got a bit older. But yeah, so I moved to Birmingham in 1990 when I was 15, and developed chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, it's probably but the listeners to this show are probably thinking, well, why is he mentioning this? I've mentioned this chronic fatigue syndrome because Kathleen Marden, who is she's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. If your listeners or yourselves know Betty and Barney Hill case,
the interrupted journey from the
interrupted journey, that's the one.
1960s. Black husband, white lady, who were abducted by Greys, I believe. It was kind of come down from Canada into North America on an overnight trip, and they got back a lot later than they expected to be. Hence the interrupted journey. Yeah, that's the one.
Well, the niece at the time, Kathleen. She went on to do an awful lot of research with their particular story, and she then got into other abduction cases and whatnot. She found some sort of correlation between chronic fatigue syndrome and alien abduction. Where the correlation is, I think it's just the case that they did a lot of research into like almost like a tick chart of ailments, if you like, of people that had claimed to have been abducted. Chronic fatigue syndrome was one of them. So that's kind of why I mentioned this. But I had it for about a year, very ill with it. And one evening, I woke up in the living room, standing up, and by my feet, I had I got these rolls of wallpaper. My mum had been decorating at the time, and I'd arranged all these rolls of wallpaper in the shape of Stonehenge. And like I say, I woke up standing up in the living room. Don't know how I got there. Don't know how I was able to actually stand while I was asleep. Never slept walk before, and I've never slept walk since. So again, I'm not sure quite what that was all about.
So can I just? You had actually arranged the rolls of
I'd arranged,
like a Stonehenge model type of thing.
Yeah, but I was asleep. I didn't know that I'd done it, but I had. I don't know what the reasoning was. It was the strangest thing for me was the fact of waking up in the living room and being standing up. That was strange. You know, if I woke up in the living room and I was lying on the floor, I could probably see, you know, I could see the logic in that.
Did you have a history? Did you have a history of sleepwalking at all?
Not at all. No, this is. If I did, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it within this talk, because I think it's one of those things that on its own you dismiss it, but when you look at all the other sort of odd things that have happened, you kind of look back over the years and you think, well, why, you know, is there a reason why this happened, or is there a reason why that happened? And, you know, to a lot of people, it's just an odd thing to happen, and, you know, they'd carry on with their lives and not think much of it. But yeah, so that was a bit of a strange sort of experience. But I started going to art college. Hadn't got a clue what I wanted to do as a job. My upbringing up until that age had been quite chaotic and quite. My schooling had been disrupted time and time again with moving, and family life was always an upheaval all the time. So moving to Birmingham was a bit of an antidote, if you like. It was, everything sort of slowed down, and I was able to think a little bit more. Didn't have to go to church. I was really good at art, so I went to art college, and I met my partner, Lucy. Now she was doing a work experience from school. She was 15, I was 17, and we sort of got together and, you know, started dating. And like I say, this would have been around about 93 at the time. And she lived in Coleshill in Birmingham, and we were sitting in her bedroom, and we would, like I say, so we would have been sort of mid to late teens, both of us. And I was looking through these photos that she'd had, and pulled out this one photo, and I said to her, "What are you doing with this photo? This is a bit odd." And she said, "Oh, I just took this photo when I was about 7 on a trip to Wales." Now, the photo was a photo of 3 people, and the photo was of my sister and my aunt and my nan. And I couldn't quite work out how she managed to take a photo of these 3 family members that were, my aunt and my nan were very close to me. So I took this photo back to London, and I showed my family. I said, "What do you make of this?" And my family said, "Well, it's your nan and your sister and your aunt. You know, all the clothes were the same. Everything was, it was them in the photo. Nobody else in the photo." And they said, "Well, you know, what's the problem with the photo? I don't get it." I said, "Well, this photo is what Lucy took when she was 7 on a trip to Wales, and it's of my family." So it struck another chord then of synchronistic events, so things that are beyond coincidence. And it was almost as if it was like a hint to say, you need to stay with this person. You know, there's something not necessarily special about her. I mean, obviously there is. I have to say that.
There's something special about you.
yeah. So there was almost a sense of we had to stay together. There was something special about us as a partnership, if you like. So that was the first sort of synchronistic event, if you like. So this photo that I'd seen in her possession of my family. Remember, she lived in Birmingham. She grew up in Birmingham. I grew up in London. We got together at college. And as I say, so she's got this photo that's 160 miles kind of out of time almost, if that makes any sense.
Did it freak her out?
I don't think it's really freaked her out. I mean, it's something that, I mean, I question everything. I see something strange happen, and I want to know what it's all about. Her attitude is, if there's no answer, if I can't find an answer, I'm not going to go looking. And that sort of attitude will crop up later on in this talk with a really bizarre UFO account. But yeah, so we're very different, really different. She won't question much. She'll accept things for what they are, whereas I will question everything.
That's interesting. Anyway, carry on. It's very interesting.
So do you think, just briefly, would you go along the lines, because some people believe that the Greys or the ETs or whatever kind of orchestrate things in people's lives deliberately? Do you think that that's going on in the background?
Yes. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
And have you come to a conclusion about what the reason would be? Like, are they? Is it just a game to them? Is it playing out a game, or is there something more to it that's deeper?
Well, I think when I got to sort of late or mid-teens, so 14, 15, like I say, moving to Birmingham, I always had a sense that I was being missed elsewhere, that I should have been elsewhere, that I should be with another family somewhere else.
Like an alternative reality type of life.
Not necessarily an alternative reality, but almost like it was a feeling of being stranded here. And I had this feeling for years and years and years, and it was only when we started getting the internet and things like that, and getting in touch with different people that had similar experiences, and it's almost like the same thing being said by other people, that feeling of being stranded, that feeling of being, or also had a feeling of having some kind of mission to accomplish, which is very common as well.
Yeah.
If talk to any experiencer, they will tell you the same thing, that they feel deep within themselves that they have a mission to play out, which I'll get into a bit later, but I'll leave that there for now.
Okay, very interesting. So this picture, she wasn't too phased about it. She wasn't going to ask questions, but it started to kind of stir curiosities within you then.
It may, yeah. I mean, the question that I always asked was, is there, like what Andy said about something in the background orchestrating people almost like on a chessboard, moving people around, and causing, I mean, the amount of odd situations that I've been in since being a child. If you write it all down and show somebody, that they don't believe it. It's just bizarre life story, if you like. But yeah, a lot of years I felt that there's something with me, kind of, I'm almost nudging me in one direction, and then something else nudging me in a completely opposite direction, almost like there's a game. We're almost like pawns in a game, and either side are trying to win you over, if you like, or stop you doing certain things to further your either research or further your understanding for whatever reason. I don't know. But it's definitely a feeling that is shared by a lot of either experiences, abductees, whatever you want to call them.
So after this picture, you're taking it down to London to your other family, and they kind of verified your own sort of curiosity on that, or findings. What happened next?
Nothing actually happened with the photo, but I think for me it was almost like a confirmation that this is the person that you need to stay with, and that was it. It was almost a confirmation for me, really, more than anything. It was beyond a coincidence, and like I said, the family members that I showed, when I explained to them what the photo was and where it had come from, they said, it's giving me shivers. Everybody that I've shown and I've told them about this photo, they've all said the same thing. It's a bit freaky. It's a bit strange.
I wonder what the odds are on a statistical basis for that. It does remind me of a story that I was told many, many years ago by a friend that had watched one of these sort of weekday phone-in programs on the TV, the Richard and Judy type of thing, where they were actually talking about coincidences. And I may have actually told you this before, Lee, I'm not sure. But this couple had phoned in because they had a weird coincidence where they were on holiday somewhere and they had the wife was somehow involved in a car accident, which resulted in her having to go into hospital for about a week to have various treatments and things. And so the husband would come in and visit her every day, but after about a few days they'd get really, really bored of just sitting in hospital. So they said, is there any games or puzzles that we can do to kind of alleviate our boredom? And the matron at the ward she was on said, yeah, there's this old jigsaw puzzle here you can use, but unfortunately the lid's gone missing some years back, so you're going to have to figure out all the pieces on your own back, sort of thing. So they spent a few days trying to assemble this jigsaw without the lid, and eventually it all came together, and they realised once they put the whole pieces of the jigsaw into place that it was actually a place they'd been to a few years previously on holiday, because they recognised the scene, the harbour or whatever it was, and then they looked closer and they actually saw themselves in the actual photo of the jigsaw.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so it's a similar kind of thing, really. And
it is similar, yeah.
My friend remarked at the time, he said he wondered if symbolically, them putting the jigsaw pieces together was symbolically putting her back together after the accident, which I thought was an interesting idea. But yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Very, very interesting, these weird photos turn up in weird places.
I've got a quick question, Lee. Just to be absolutely clear, the photo was taken when it was your girlfriend who was 7 years old. And was it kind of like the family your family members in the background, or were they deliberately coating?
It was almost like a random okay, it was like a lawn in, if you imagine a stately home. Okay. So you've got like what do you call it, box hedges going along. And they'd literally walked into the shot as Lucy had taken the photo. Oh,
I see.
So the three of them were in the shot. But if you take the three of them out of the shot, it would have made a really, really crap photo. There was nothing. It was just a lawn.
Yeah.
There was nothing there. It was just a lawn with a box hedge, and that was it. But with the three of them in the photo, it kind of gave it some meaning, some relevance. So I don't think she was taking a photo of them as such, but they just happened to be in the photo.
It's odd that she kept the photo all those years, because it was obviously people she didn't know. And as you say, it was a crap photo without the people. So it didn't sound like a remarkable photo at kind of just a glance, but it's really strange that she kind of kept it in her album or something.
I guess, yeah. I mean, that is another thing to consider, I suppose. But say even down to the clothing, the cardigans, the hairstyle, everything. My aunt and my nan wore the same style of clothes. I mean, my nan now has died, but even up until the time she did die, she wore the same cardigan, the same dress, and my aunt, same hairstyle, same clothes, same shoes. Everything was the same.
Was confirmation given that your relatives had actually been to this particular stately home?
We couldn't work out where it was. All Lucy knew was that it was in Wales.
I see. Okay. But it was confirmed by your other relatives, your aunt and uncle, that it definitely was the relatives concerned in the picture as far as they were concerned.
Yeah. And other family members that confirmed, and they looked at the photo and said, well, yeah, it's obvious who it is, what's the deal, So to my other family members, they looked at it, and even my sister looked at it, and she said, that's the most freakiest thing I've ever seen. You know.
Yeah, I bet it is. Like you say, I mean, if it's my family, it certainly sends shivers up my spine. Of, say, seeing my family in a photo in America or something like that, thinking, "What's my mum doing in America? She's never been," or something, you know.
But yeah, so I mean, so with Lucy and I, we obviously started dating, and we had a lot in common, and we moved in together, and we were living together for about a year or so. So it was about 1995. So we got together in 93. We moved in together after 2 years, so it's about 95. And there's a significance to the dates that I'm giving you, and I'll recount all these dates as at the end.
Okay.
And you'll see why. So 95, we'd moved into a flat, and it was a grotty flat. It wasn't the best flat at all. Rats under the floorboards. That it needed decorating. It was a really terrible place. But we were teenagers, and we almost like dossing, I suppose. I was asleep on the settee one evening, and Lucy woke me up after this event, and she said, "You'll never believe what has just happened." She said, I was sitting here watching TV, and the room changed frequency. She said, it's the only way that I could describe it. She said the room changed frequency like a radio was being detuned. And she said, I watched this big black teardrop mist shape come into the room, move through the room, and then out through the other wall. I didn't see it. There was no road behind the room that we were in. There was obviously a window to the back garden, but that backed onto another garden, so you couldn't. There was no cars or anything that could have caused any change in the lighting or anything like that. And we'd gone through all this, and she said while it was happening, she had to think so quickly, because she knew that people were going to question her and say, "Oh, it was a car driving past. It was this going on," And she said, "None of that. None of it. It was that would have been impossible." But she watched this black mist, very, very similar to what my parents used to see when I was born, move through the wall, move through the living room, outside into another wall. And then she said the frequency of the room returned back to normal again. So that's something that I didn't experience, but that was her sort of experience, if you like.
Wow, I've never heard it described as frequency changing in a room, in the sense of people would sort of say vibrations or something. They feel. I mean, maybe that's what she meant. The vibrations or the the resonance of the room seemed to change for her from maybe in a calm, relaxed state from watching TV to something maybe more. It sounds sinister, but did she have a kind of sinister retrospective feeling about it?
From what she's told me before, no. It was the frequency changed. This thing came out, or went out, and then the frequency went back to normal.
Now, Andy, you've heard of shadow people, haven't you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, this black mist is ringing bells to do with the shadow people and that kind of thing. So, but I'm finding more and more, and I often bring this up in the interviews, that there is a correlation between ghosts and spirit and the dead, so to speak, and the UFOs and the ETs. And so when these black mist appears, I'm actually wondering, is it kind of like a shadow being spirit person, or is it something that's ET? So it's quite a conundrum, really. How will we ever know what it is?
Well, again, with all the research that I've done, people that I've spoken to, it's the same story over and over again. The paranormal mixed with UFOs. If you have a UFO sighting, 9 times out of 10, you'll have some kind of paranormal or poltergeist. Well, I tend to call it poltergeist sort of activity, but I kind of think there's a science behind it.
Yeah, I agree. And what's really interesting is that when I do my psychic events, I kind of like organise psychic fairs and things, and so I meet a lot of psychics. A lot of them have had weird paranormal experiences in terms of not just the ghost, but also the alien side as well. And interestingly, talking about the vibrations thing, this is really coincidental. One of my readers, I was doing an event in Epping last night, actually, and I won't name her, but one of my readers was telling me that actually she gets abducted and she sees the greys, and she says when it first started happening, what she'd see is glowing orbs of light, like lots of them within her house, and they would just kind of hang there. And she would go and get her husband and say, "What on earth is this? What do you think these are all about?" And then they kind of like formed into the kind of like the grey beings. And she said that as this was happening, the whole house, it was as if the whole house was vibrating. She almost expected the whole house to kind of lift up off its roots and go into the sky. Obviously, that didn't happen, but she felt the house changed vibration as if it wasn't really there. Now, this is really interesting because this ties in with when people are talking about being abducted, being on their beds and being floated through walls and floated through windows as if it wasn't there. It's almost as if they're kind of like changing the frequency of hard reality into something fluid and then back again. And how they're doing this, God knows, but this seems to be kind of like a consistent pattern. What do you think, Leigh?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've read a lot. You know, recently I've read more stuff like that. But yeah, like you're changing the. I suppose it's the same if you have a sound wave, if you like. You know, like the soprano singers, where they would hit a certain note and a glass would shatter. Well, that's an actual phenomena that actually occurs when the frequency of a sound wave matches that of say a piece of glass, and you can manipulate the physical reality of that glass, and that's why it shatters. So any frequency above or below that wouldn't affect the glass at all. If that makes any sense.
There's an interesting correlation with the NASA rockets, actually. Certainly in the early days, that when they used to launch a rocket, the actual vibrations caused by the engines were so sort of tremendous that they would ripple up the tube of the rocket backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And they actually found there was a danger that the whole rocket would just shatter like a glass because of that vibrational aspect. And I can't remember how they cured the situation, but it was certainly a major problem, even for the Saturn V's. If one of the engines went off or wasn't firing as 100%, say like the other 5 or 4 of them, there was certainly a danger of the Apollo rockets breaking up in mid-flight as well.
If I can just quickly go back to what Andy was saying about the lady that he was, I think, was she doing a reading, or you were doing a reading for her? She had the lights in the room. Yeah, and they collect together.
It's not. We weren't actually doing readings. She basically what it is. I organise psychic fairs, so I kind of like bring other psychics and readers in on events. And she, we often chat when it's a bit quiet or there's some like a downtime. We have a chat, and so this was a chat situation. There was a group of us together, and we were relaying kind of like spooky stories and experiences that we've had. And she was talking about Philip Kinsella, funnily enough, and she was saying, what she was talking about very much correlates with what happens with Philip and how he describes abductions as well. And
sorry for butting in.
Yeah,
just quickly, the reason why I was going back to that, throughout all my sort of experiences, I wondered if there was something that followed through families, things like that. So I said to my mum, I said, you know all about my experiences and whatnot. And she said, yeah. I said, well, have you had any strange things? I mean, I know that she's had a lot of paranormal, ghostly things happen. Things going missing when I was a kid, and odd things happening over the past 10 years or so. But I said to her, "Is there any sort of, have you seen any UFOs or anything like that?" I didn't want to spook her, but she said, "No, no, not really. No, I haven't really seen anything like that." And the conversation sort of came to an end, and then she just suddenly said, "Actually, when I was a child, I used to see this light in the bedroom that used to get bigger and bigger, and these three little creatures used to come out." And I just sort of slapped my face and just thought, right, okay. So there could be something that is that goes through families.
I just find it actually interesting. I mean, the phenomenon of what you're describing, has a familiarity to it from, like you say, other people that have had similar things like Philip Kinsella and other UFO abductee experiences. Any reason do you actually think, or have you ever considered, why does it always tend to be three creatures that tend to come out of these things in general?
I really don't know.
Yeah, it's almost
three's a magic number, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's like strength in numbers, that it maybe they have a kind of plan that if the person awakes or something, they've got three of them to kind of subdue the person.
I don't know. Maybe there's three sets of protocol that they have to adhere to.
Yeah,
because there is a suggestion that they're not actual. I mean, they're biological, but there's a suggestion that they're actual robots in a way. What's the word when they're robots and cyborgs?
Oh,
is that the
cyborg,
no, that's not the right word.
Yeah, biological mechanical entities or something.
Kind of, yeah. So almost as if one has to be the lookout, one has to subdue the person, and the other one has to levitate them. Yeah. It could be that. You just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that normally when people have cited these things or they recall their own abduction experiences, they said they normally feel them all gather all around, and one's holding their head and one's holding their arms, and they're kind of lifting them through a window or into a craft or something like that. So I would suggest that maybe when your relative saw the three people stepping out, that it was maybe an abduction in mind. You see, being that there's three of them.
I don't know. I mean, because it was my mum, I don't know if, maybe her mum had, similar encounters, because, I mean, these stories go back hundreds and hundreds of years, back into folklore. If you look at a lot of, if you go to old 16th, 17th century houses, you'll sometimes find a shoe above the stairs. And what that was to ward off the goblins that used to take children in the night. I think they favoured either girls or boys over the other. So what they would do is put the opposite sexed shoe. So if they favoured girls, they'd put a boy's shoe at the top of the stairs to let these goblins know that actually there was a boy living here, not a girl. So on your bike, sort of thing.
I wonder if
that's quite a common.
The elf makers, the elves that made the shoes overnight. I wonder if that ties in with that kind of story. Do you remember that story that they made the shoes overnight to help the
elf
shoemaker?
And the shoe. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we'll take a break now, if that's all right, Lee.
Yeah, sure.
But you're talking about we're delving back into the history of these sightings and experiences, and we'll continue that in part 2.
Well, I've got a lot of stuff to get through, I must say.
Okay,
so
we'll carry on. We'll wade through it as much as we can then.
Okay, brilliant.
For the moment, we'll take a break and we'll say thank you very much to Leigh Thatcher, and we'll be back with part 2 with Andy and myself in a minute.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. TalkStream Live, now available in the iTunes App Store.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Andy Chaplin here with Neil Geddes-Ward, and you're listening to Paranormal UK Radio. We're here with Leigh Thatcher, who is a UFO experiencer, and I understand you've got a few more synchronistic stories you want to share with us, Leigh.
Well, not necessarily synchronistic, but I have got an awful lot more paranormal and UFO stories that I want to share with you. I don't know if they are synchronistic actually, but yeah, say round about sort of the year 2000, we'd been Lucy and I had been living together for would have been 5 years or so, 5, 6, yeah, about 5 years, and we had 2 children by then, and we were living in a flat in Birmingham. We'd moved a couple of times since the ghostly kind of black mist figure that we saw in 95. So the year 2000, we were living now in a flat, 2 children, very young children, toddlers. One of Neve was, I think she was still a baby at the time, and Jessica would have been 2, something like that. And we used to do a lot of walking. We still do, but we used to go out, do a lot of walking. And we had a pushchair with pockets in the side. And we had Lucy had a purse that would fit in the pocket. And it went missing, like as purses do. We searched the flat. We were, frantic, trying to look for this purse with the money in. Went back to the pushchair where the pocket was, where it would normally sit. Wasn't in there. And like with anything that you mislay, you always keep going back to the same place. Kept on going back to this pushchair, and there it was. It was just slotted in, as if an unknown hand had just had a bit of a game and slotted this purse back in the pocket. And we thought, okay, game's over. Let's go and do a bit of shopping. Around about the same time, I'd gone camping with a few friends, and we going back to we went to Wales, Cadaridris, which is a mountain I think it's the second largest mountain in Wales. Anyway, we've gone camping there, me and a few mates, and during the night I had this extremely vivid dream. Again, we can't sort of pin everything on dreams. But anyway, I had this dream where I was stood outside the tent watching this UFO depart, and I was watching it, and I had the feeling that I had to watch it. It wasn't a choice. They made me watch it, and I got back into the tent and went back to sleep. Now that was the dream. Now when I came home, again, this is around the same sort of time that we had objects missing again, and they turn up in odd places. I told Lucy about this dream that I had, UFO, Wales, and we didn't think much of it. Anyway, I was on the phone one evening, again, around about the same time, and I spoke to a friend of mine. I said, I had this weird dream, when I went to Wales, it's sort of bugging me a bit. And I said, it's about, I saw this UFO, and I carried on talking, and I kept saying, hello, you there? And the phone had been cut off. The phone had gone completely dead. And so we tried using the phone again. The phone was completely dead. Nothing. It wasn't that his phone had been, the friend that I was talking to, it wasn't like his phone had been cut off and, we could hang up and then phone back again. The phone was completely dead. So straight after saying the word UFO. And I thought, okay, maybe this is a bit of a coincidence. Anyway, later that night, Lucy was on the phone. The phone had come back on. Lucy was on the phone, and she was talking to one of her friends, and she happened to mention the fact that that I was on the phone earlier, mentioned the word UFO, and the phone had cut off. Well, as soon as she mentioned the word UFO, the phone cut off. And it was a situation that we sort of brought everything together. Things go missing. You dream about UFOs, and then, like I say, the phone cut off, completely dead. So we thought, hold on, I'd read a lot about government intervention and, where UFOs are concerned. And we thought, oh, maybe we're under surveillance or something, something quite sort of cool like that, like MI5 or something. But anyway, nothing else happened. We went about our business and we carried on. And then a few years later, we moved again, moved to Masonette, and then we moved from there to the house that we're living in at the moment. And it's the house that we're living in at the moment where all sorts of bizarre things started to occur. So we're now up to 2005. Now, if you notice, all the dates that I've given you, they're 5 years apart. So all the things that have happened, they seem to happen every 5 years. You'll have like a collection of events within weeks of each other, and then nothing. And it's almost, I mean, I've only sort of worked this out over the past year or so, that this is actually a case that every 5 years, as I was documenting everything, that this was an actual thing where there's, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Literally where every 5 years something else happens. So we're back up to 2005, where we moved into the house we're in at the moment. And so our eldest, Jessica, she would have been, I think she was about 6 at the time. And we were stood at the back door looking out one of our cats was scrabbling up against the window to try and get in. And she found this quite amusing, Jessica did. So I was stood with her, and I looked down, and I had the distinct feeling that somebody had gripped my wrist. And I thought, that's a bit odd. That is somebody's hand around my wrist. So I looked down, nothing there. So I thought nothing else of it. Anyway, we stopped watching the cat, who was, she I think we let her in, or we'd finished doing what we were doing. Minutes later, Jessica turned around to me and she said, what was that? And I said, what was what? And she said, somebody's just run their hand up my arm. Now, considering she was 6, and I'd had this same experience minutes before, it kind of made me think, right, okay, maybe something else is going to start happening. But nothing did. So she had this experience, I'd had this experience, and that was it. Nothing else happened. So again, just to reiterate, it was 2005, and we've lived in this house for about 13 years now. So nothing else happened up until 2010, where things started to get really weird. We started hearing animal noises in the hallway. We started to hear. It was like a dog, but it wasn't a dog. It was like a cat, but it wasn't a cat. It was something in between. Now we did have cats, but this was an animal that you could hear clear as day in the hallway. And I heard it. I said nothing to Lucy. Subsequently, Lucy had heard it. She said nothing to me. What happened was that our youngest daughter, Neve, she was on the set. Lucy and I had gone to the cinema. Neve was on the settee, and she phoned us. She was with a friend. Her friend was over with her. She phoned us, and she was in hysterics. And she said, I need you to come home. She said, there's an animal in the hallway. So I said, all right, okay. So I put the phone down. I told Lucy, and she said, I've been hearing this noise as well. So this carried on periodically over weeks and weeks and weeks. This noise of this animal, couldn't work out what it was, who it was. And then we heard, we started to get things like we'd go to bed at night, and then 15 minutes, you could literally set your clock by 15 minutes after going to bed, you'd hear something falling into the bath, like a like a shampoo bottle, and I'd get up, go into the bathroom, and the bath would be empty. There'd be nothing in there. And again, this was occurring night after night after night. 10 minutes, 15 minutes after going to bed. We weren't even asleep, but you could hear this thing falling into the bath. Nothing in there. And then this is when things got even weirder. Where one evening, well, it was during the night, I'd woken up, I couldn't sleep, and I noticed what was. It can only be described as a jellyfish in the bedroom. And it was literally floating as if it was in water across the room and then across the bed and then up the wall. And then I looked and I thought, oh, that was interesting. And then turned over and went back to bed. And this happened again a week or so later. I woke up in the middle of the night, saw this jellyfish floating along in the bedroom. Again, this is 2010, so 5 years on from when Jessica and I felt these hands. So that was that. And I explained to Lucy what I saw, and couldn't work out what it was. And in the summer, we were on the back of our house. We've got a big field, so we were playing badminton, and we noticed it was late. It was late in the afternoon, and we noticed there was a grid in the sky. Now, this isn't like the Matrix. It was like somebody had got a piece of lined paper and just let it rest in the sky above us. Giant line paper. You could see these lines really faintly, but we both saw them. Again, couldn't work out what on earth it was. And that was like the collection of weird things. I mean, there was other things that used to happen, things that would just fly down the stairs. But it was almost as if the hallway was almost like a portal, if you like, for odd things to happen. So that takes us up to about 2011.
And then it all ceased for a while after that then?
Well, yeah, all those things happened. Like I say, 2010, 2011, this grid in the sky, that was the last sort of weird thing that happened around about then. And then it all died down again.
Did the grid in the sky, I'm kind of very curious, and I recollect you mentioned this before to me in your talk at our group. Did the grid in the sky, though, cover literally right down to the horizon as far as you can see, or was it only a portion of the sky? It's difficult to explain, but it was so faint that you couldn't see where it ended. It was only where we were, if you like, because you could just about make it out. And nobody else could see it? I mean, was there other people that might have looked up, maybe?
Possibly. I mean, there was only me and Lucy on the field at the time, but I think I noticed it and I showed her, and she looked and she was a bit perplexed by it. Whether other people could see it, I'm not sure.
That's interesting.
But the only thing that I can, excuse me, the only thing I can pinpoint as a reference would be when birds navigate from one country to the next, they use their sense of the Earth's magnetic lines, if you like. So they would fly almost in a very straight line.
I was going to say, it sounds very similar to kind of what people call as energy grids or ley lines.
Possibly, yeah. But this was an actual. Well, I mean, when I say a grid, I mean like just lines in the sky that were equidistant, from each other. So, but they weren't crisscrossing like a square grid. It was just a lined grid line, if you like.
Like a grill.
Yeah.
Did it appear to be made of vapor or white cloudy material?
No. it looked almost ethereal, if you like. That's the only way that I could describe it. So it wasn't, because I mean, obviously a mist would kind of dissipate and move around. This was very sort of as if you could see the lines of a magnet that a magnet would make. That's the only.
Okay, so normally we would make lines of a magnet with iron filings on a piece of paper or something, wouldn't we? But obviously in this case, you're looking in the sky, a blue sky, you're seeing an impression, a vague impression, where maybe the sky's gone slightly discoloured, where this grid might appear in front of. Is that right?
It was so faint. It was very, very faint.
Yeah, so a blue sky, then you've got like a line over it that might be sort of changes the shade of blue, because that's how you identify that there's something potentially there.
Yes, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah,
yeah. So it's like a layer of something, but an opaque layer of something.
Yeah, I suppose I kind of understand what you're saying, as if the atmosphere around, so clouds and anything that was in the way, would kind of sort of show you periodically where the lines were, but you couldn't actually see the lines. They weren't solid lines in the sky. They were just sort of.
I'm just wondering if a skeptic, like sometimes if you're staring at TV for a long, long time, maybe in a darkened room, and it's a bright TV image, then you stare away from it. You've got that kind of impression on your vision. You can kind of see a white square or rectangle in front of your vision, even though you're not looking at the TV, because it's kind of burnt into your iris or something. I'm wondering if skeptics might say, "Oh, that's what you've been staring at a fence, and then you looked up, and that impression of the fence has kind of reproduced itself."
I mean, we were playing badminton, so we did have badminton rackets. However, a badminton racket for the skeptics is like a network, a crisscross of lines. It's not just one set of lines. It's like an actual grid.
And there was definitely no chalk dust in the sky. Could have been the clouds, but
you cannot be serious. I had to do that.
Yes.
So that was a very, I thought I'd put that in there because, like I say, your listeners may have had the same sort of experience, seen the same sort of thing, and there may be somebody that can link something together. And
I'm linking something together now, and I'm actually wondering if it was an early kind of version of what people are reporting now of these streams. What do they call it? These where they've got planes releasing chemtrails.
The chemtrails.
Yeah. It's
funny you should say that, because I'm just about to talk about chemtrails.
Oh, well, we'll lead into it.
that leads nicely on. I mean, this we're up to 2012 now, and it was a sunny day. It was in the I think it was about July time, and it was recorded on the internet. I recorded this incident, and there's a few other people that recorded it or documented it. Sorry. What happened was, it was a bright blue sky, July, I think, and I noticed I'd gone to we live in a place called Kings Norton, and I had walked to Kings Norton Green, which is about, I think it's about a mile and a half away. And on my way back, I noticed a fleet of planes of high up, and there was about 6 of these planes, very, very close to each other, and they were circling the whole of South Birmingham. And you could see, whether you believe in chemtrails or not, this is what they were. They were laying down. These planes were laying down streams of chemtrails that were in a circle. The whole of South Birmingham had a circle of chemtrails. Now, these planes would go around, and it'd take them about 20 minutes to do a full circle, and they went over Shirley in Birmingham.
Did she mind?
Well, she complained as well. She was one of the. They did a full circle. 20 minutes it took. And I was watching, and I thought, I've seen chemtrails before, but this was really, really out of the ordinary. And I started to see orbs just appear in the trails. And what would happen was these orbs would appear, they'd move along, and then they'd blink out. And then 2 minutes later, another one would. This is above the house. I'm not sure how high up, because I'm not au fait with aviation and planes and how high up they are. But let's say they were very high up. So these orbs would appear in the chemtrails, and they'd move along and they'd blink out. And I called Lucy and I said, look, come and have a look at this. And she confirmed it. She said, that they look pretty cool, a bit weird, but very cool. So I went online and I documented it, and it turned out that there were people in different areas of Birmingham that were people that are similar to us, who are interested in this sort of thing, who actually bothered to look up. They'd noticed these chemtrails, and there was orbs here, there, and everywhere. And it kind of reminded me of the Foo Fighters, not the band, of these, I think it was Second World War, something like that. And they'd appear. There'd be these big balls of light in the sky that would intercept other aircraft during the war. And it was the same sort of thing. Big balls of light appear and disappear. And so it was about the time that we were going to car boot sales and things like that. So I thought, so we'd gone to a car boot sale, and I thought, right, okay, we're having all these weird things happening. I've seen my second UFO. I'll buy a pair of binoculars. So I bought a pair of binoculars, and I put them on the shelf by the back door, just in case anything else happened. Anybody else would have bought a camera, but not me. I bought a pair of binoculars, and left it at that, and carried on with my business. Now, my business is actually a garden. I'm a gardener, so I spend an awful lot of time outdoors in all sorts of weather. And it was, it was 2012, about a month or so later from this incident with the chemtrails and the orbs. I was in Edgbaston, and I was in somebody's garden. I wasn't in anybody's garden. It was a customer's garden. And I used to listen to an awful lot of podcasts because I could. I'd get them off the internet and put them on the iPod and listen to interviews just like this one. All sorts of different people, all sorts of strange and wonderful stories. And one of the stories was of a woman who claimed that she could call these orbs out the sky. So I thought, okay, right, I'll give this a go. This sounds like something I could do. So the customer that I was working for, she was a golfer. So she'd gone out for the day playing golf. I was left alone. So I thought, right, I used to do a bit of meditating. I'll give it a go. So I sat in the garden behind these conifers in this big sort of clearing. Like I say, it would have been about 2:00 in the afternoon. Bright blue sky, ordinary sort of afternoon. And I went into a very, very light sort of trance, if you like, meditating. And I started to call out, and I started to say, well, if there's any UFOs about, come and say hello, pay me a visit. And I did this for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I could hear helicopters. And I thought, my first thought was, I ask for UFOs and I get helicopters. I thought, well, this isn't good, So I could hear more than, I thought it was a Chinook because you could hear more than one propeller. So I went onto the main lawn of this woman's garden, And I looked up, and just above the rooftops, not far away, not far at all, was this big black orb. And it, the first thing that I thought of was it's got to be a microlight. It's got to be some sort of manned. It's got to be some sort of manned machine. And I thought, well, no, it's moving too slow. It's round. It's dark. It looked like a Pokemon ball. It looked like a giant Pokemon ball. And the helicopters were escorting it. So I was just stood in awe watching this thing. And I thought, right, I've called this. This is what I've asked for. It's not just a helicopter. It's a big car-size orb moving across the rooftops with these 3 military helicopters circling it. And you could see the orb it looked as if it was trying to move nearer to me, but the helicopters were ushering it out of the way. And I watched this for about 5 minutes or so. And this whole sort of sequence of events just sort of went across the horizon and off into the distance, over the rest of the rooftops, out of sight, couldn't see anything. So I was dumbfounded. So I thought, right, okay, I'll phone Lucy. I'll tell her. And I phoned her and I said, "You're never going to guess what I've just seen." And she said, before you go any further, she said, "Who's on the phone with you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, I can hear somebody else on the phone. I said, "No, it's just me." And she said, "No, that I can hear somebody else on the phone line." Now, what I didn't mention was when I first saw these orbs in the chemtrails, when I started talking on the internet about them, we started getting a lot of military helicopters coming over the house, and then anywhere I'd go, I'd have a military helicopter flying over. It didn't matter where I was. Literally every day, every couple of days, anywhere in South Birmingham, you can guarantee there'd be a helicopter. And the one afternoon, I thought the car was falling to bits, and it was actually a Chinook that had decided to fly so low over the car that the car was you could feel the whole car shaking. So I'd done this orb calling, if you like, and that was the result.
Whoa, that's pretty
Interesting.
heavy stuff.
Interesting.
You have experienced that, don't you, Andy, of military helicopters trailing people?
100%. Now you're skeptical, Neil. You're skeptical because I've told you about the helicopter things and a mutual person that we both know as well having the helicopters, and and actually Irene's quite skeptical as well. Another host on another show.
I know Irene.
Yeah, the helicopters do exist. It does happen. Now, the main period in my life when I was getting a ton of helicopters and jets, funnily enough, military jets flying over, is when I was at my most kind of like meditative. Now, I should get back into meditation, which is a bit naughty. I've kind of like let it lapse, unfortunately. But a few years ago, I was very into meditation, very into going to circles, very into psychic development. It was at that period that I was seeing sort of the classic orbs, the little kind of like small beads of light. There are a lot of skeptics kind of watching things like Most Haunted, etc., say it's just insects and dust and stuff, and no doubt a lot of them is, dust and insects, but I've seen these orbs firsthand. I know that they do exist, and it was at this period of my life when I was getting black helicopters, and it was they were kind of coming, and you may find this as well, Leigh, at specific times. So I noticed it was about 2:00 in the morning they used to appear, and they used to just kind of circle around my house, just this black helicopter, and I could tell it was black because sometimes it was kind of moonlit. It was kind of like there'd be a full moon, or there'll be enough of a moon to kind of work out like its colour. Put it this way, it wasn't yellow, it wasn't white.
I was going to say, I think the thing is when you start getting these military helicopters, any helicopter that you hear and see, you look at. Now you'll know the Red Cross, I think it's the red, the blood helicopter that carries the blood is red. I think.
Yeah.
And then you've got the police helicopters that are,
Yeah.
I mean, in Birmingham, I think they're black and yellow.
Yeah. Our ones in Hertfordshire are kind of navy blue and yellow, and they're a different size and a different sound. Now these military ones, they're cheeky buggers because in the past couple of years, having known somebody quite psychic, they've started turning up in the early evening, so they're quite visible, and they've got a very specific shape. They've got they're very elongated, they're very long. Some of them have had kind of like gun turrets, and some of them have had like kind of disc-shaped radars on top of the blades, which are 100% military. That ain't police, because I know what the police ones look like and what they sound like. And this person that I know in the town next to me, funnily enough, these helicopters used to be hovering above her house and circling her house, and I'd get Facebook messages or WhatsApp messages saying they're back again, and I'd grab my binoculars because I could see the airspace over where she lived, and sure enough, they'd be flying over. And funnily enough, this would be in conjunction with other weird stuff, such as things happening in her house, poltergeist type activity, orbs, kind of presences coming in and out. And Leigh, I'm pretty sure you would have the same thing. I would bet the most psychic experiences that you've ever had is when these helicopters turn up.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned about the orbs. We had all the main sort of UFO activity happened within around about 2012 sort of time, which I don't think is relevant at all as far as the whole 2012 end of the world sort of thing is concerned. Just in case the listeners were sort of thinking that. Around about the same. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you about this next UFO that I saw, and then I'll tell you about the light anomalies that accompanied it.
Can I just say something about the helicopters before we leave?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's been sort of suggested by other UFO researchers. David Caton was one of them, who came to the Paranormal meetup group that we run in High Wycombe back in October, I think it was last year, or November. And he said that people have sighted UFOs, particularly around like radio antenna masts and things like that. But they've been cited to be mimicking the sounds of aeroplanes. I think a Spitfire was one of them. But also, sometimes they are sort of morphing into other objects. And I'm wondering whether the helicopters are actually UFOs that have morphed into helicopters because they're showing up around the time of psychic phenomena. Just a thought,
okay.
You know? Just a
That's
thought.
an interesting thought. Yeah, I've not actually thought of that. But as far as UFOs mimicking things, I did this orb calling thing again round about the same time, because I thought, right, if I've done it once, I can do it again. And I was in this woman's garden again, same woman. I sat there meditating, and nothing happened. Nothing at all happened. And I wasn't overly disappointed because I thought, right, well, I've seen a few, so it's no big deal. I've had paranormal experiences, no big deal. 2 weeks after that, I was sat at the computer desk that used to be by the back door where the binoculars are. And outside the back, now, being a gardener, we've obviously got a lot of gardening equipment, plant pots and all that sort of stuff in the porch. Now, I was sitting at the computer, and this would have been, again, middle of the day. The children were in their bedroom. Lucy was in the kitchen, and all I heard and saw was a plant pot fall in the porch. Now, I didn't automatically think, oh, a plant pot's fallen. My first instinct was, I'm being told to go outside to look for something. So it was almost like I don't know if it was a nudge from something else telling me that there was going to be something there, or the object itself telling me, come outside, I'm here. So in my head there was a knowing that I was going to witness something. So I grabbed the binoculars because I'd bought them previously because of the other UFO that I saw at the chemtrails. So they were specifically there to look at any UFOs that may have occurred. Anyway, plant pot fell. It triggered something in my head to say, right, go outside. This is your chance to look at something. So I went outside, and there was sky was. It wasn't. It was blue sky, but there was clouds. But there was an opening, and I had my glasses on, so I could see, what was what. And I noticed this. It was like a line in the sky, a line just appearing, and I thought, right, okay, well, this obviously is what I'm meant to look at. And it got bigger and bigger. So what was happening is this object, what looked like a line, was actually descending from the sky over the house. And so with the binoculars, I obviously caught it with the binoculars, and it was lowering itself, and it got just below the clouds. So if you imagine the binoculars as one, what would you call it? As you put the binoculars to your eye, it makes one circle, doesn't it? So this object filled the whole set of binoculars. Now, what this was a set of orbs, different colours. I think the red and white orbs. They were stuck together, and there was about 6 orbs altogether, with the head of this thing had horns that was tilting. The head of it was tilting backwards and forwards, as if it was in a cup, as if it was independent of the other orbs. It was moving like it was inside a cup, and the bottom of this thing had 2 hooks on it that was also twisting and turning, but the whole object itself was contorting like a caterpillar. It's the only way of people take the mickey out of me, and they say, "Oh, have you seen any more caterpillars?" If I say the word caterpillar to somebody, they know exactly what I'm on about, and it's this object. Like I say, it had 2 hooks at the bottom, a horn-like appendage at the top, and it looked like a caterpillar. It was mimicking a caterpillar. Now, I could see it as clear as anything. It was filling up the whole binoculars. And go on.
I was going to say, a skeptic would say, hang on, there's probably a caterpillar crawling across the lens of your binoculars when you picked him up. What would you say to that?
I watched this. Well, I watched this without the binoculars, with just my glasses.
Cool.
And I could see it coming out of the sky, descending. It wasn't a plane, because there was no. It obviously wasn't a plane. Couldn't have been a helicopter, because it was. There was no exhaust fumes. There was no propeller. There was no noise. There was no nothing. It wasn't a satellite, because satellites move. This thing was. I describe it as biological. So it was I've got a picture in front of me. If you're on the internet at the moment, it's of a crop. Now, I'm not big on crop circles. I used to love crop circles, but for different reasons, I'm not a believer anymore. But that's a whole nother podcast, I think. I think it's 1994, 15th of July, Bishop Canas in Wiltshire. If you look at the crop circle that I've just, with the name that I've just, and the date that I've given you, that is the nearest picture that I could find that describes what this thing looked like.
Okay, well, what we'll perhaps do is we'll look at that after our show recording, and when we assemble a banner, if we can maybe put that image, if you can link me to that image, I can put that in the banner, so listeners can look at the banner for the show, advertising the show, and hopefully see that image and see what you're describing. Yeah.
Like I say, it would have been the size of, way bigger than a house, as big as possibly I would have thought around about size of an oak tree, maybe, big oak tree. We've got oak trees across the back of the field, and I kind of judged it by those. That's the only description. So just quickly, what I did, I said to Lucy, right, come and have a look at this. So she looked through the binoculars, and she could see this thing. I'll explain to the skeptics in a minute why it couldn't have been an actual caterpillar. So I called the children and I said, look out your bedroom window and tell me what you see. And they said, oh, it's just this weird thing coming out of the sky. Now, when Lucy saw it, she didn't see what I saw, which is interesting. She thought she was looking at what she thought an angel looked like. Now, she's not religious in any way, shape or form, far from it. But she likened it to an experience of seeing an angel. But when I describe what I saw as a caterpillar, she says, well, that's not quite what I saw. So it's interesting that we obviously have perceived the same thing, but in a completely different way. When I recorded this on the internet, if you're on the internet, you type in Leigh Thatcher caterpillar UFO, you'll come straight to the report that I made on the internet. The extra details of that I've just spoken about here, but it's a very condensed report. Now, what happened was this same object was spotted in a place in Birmingham called Northfield, which is like the next town along, if you like. Now, somebody else spotted it 20 minutes before I did, and they had reported on the very same website. So again, as regards skeptics, that's another sort of corroboration of the story.
Okay, so skeptics, you've ruled them out on that one. I've actually seen some footage on YouTube of things that you're possibly describing, maybe similar, and I think they're calling them like dragons in the sky, and they're long, kind of inflate. They look like inflated tubes, for want of a better word.
Kind of. There's a guy in England, and I came across his website a number of years ago, and I cannot for the life of me remember who he is. But when I saw his footage, and it was old footage, it was from like the 90s. He was an oldish sort of guy, but he went on record to say he'd been filming them because they're exactly the same. And I was quite excited because somebody else had seen the same thing. Now, he described what he saw as being some sort of biological entity that was like a UFO, simply because it's unidentified. But he got to a point where he couldn't take not knowing what they were anymore. So he decided to come away from it. He closed his website down and said, don't want anybody contacting me anymore. It's too much for me. But he was getting them all the time. I'll try and find, do a bit of research again and find out who this guy was.
There is websites, once they've gone offline, there is a website that actually seems to somehow link you to old versions of the website or recordings of the website. I'll try and find out what that is so that we might be able to track a few of these websites down that appear to have gone offline. There's like an archived version of it through this kind of website portal, back in time or something. It's like that. I can't remember what it's called now.
Well, now, like I say, we're talking 2012. So I've explained all these UFO encounters, and I started, whether or not it's a thing, I don't know, but I started seeing the numbers 111 a lot, which is quite a common thing again for people that are in the spiritual sort of world, people that are interested in that sort of thing. Everywhere I went, the numbers 111 would come up, and Lucy was the same. She said, "Keep seeing these numbers 111," and I had to use my birth certificate for something or other. And I looked at the address that I was born in, because I was born at home. I wasn't born in a hospital, and the house number was 111 that I was born in, which I found quite a nice little coincidence. A coincidence, not a synchronicity. But we started seeing these numbers, and we one evening, around about the same time as what we saw this caterpillar in the sky. One evening, we were sat watching the TV. Now, we've got a cabinet that had a fish tank on it with a mirror behind the fish, above the fish tank, and like a lamp next to the fish tank. And we were watching TV one night, and both of us saw it. It was, if you've ever seen the film Poltergeist, where is it Marianne Salian, the girl?
Oh, the young girl, yeah, the blonde
I think it's Marianne.
Step into the light, Caroline.
Caroline, that's it.
Caroline, that's it.
To the light, Caroline.
There's a bit in the film where she's watching static TV, and this stream of light comes out and touches her.
Yeah.
I don't know if are you familiar with that bit?
That's where it makes contact with them, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, we were sat watching TV, and this stream of light came out of the lamp. It wasn't a ball of light; it was a stream of light, and it came out like, I always describe it as a bent piece of copper, and it came out of the lamp into the room, bent itself round, and then went into the mirror within a second or two. We both looked at it. We both saw it. It was right in front of us. It wasn't like in our peripheral vision. It was straight in front of us. And we literally both looked at each other and we just said, "Oh, okay, that was interesting." And we just carried on watching. We literally just carried on watching TV.
Another normal night in your household.
Another normal. But do you know what? What was frustrating is that I started, even with the caterpillar and the military connection and the stream of light, and I was researching all this stuff all the time. I was trying my hardest to work it out. Lucy wasn't interested at all. She was only interested from an observer's point of view. I've seen it, don't know what it is, don't need to know what it is.
Maybe she was letting you do the hard work.
I think that sounds pretty much her all over. But again, we're completely different people. I'll ask questions, dig deep, whereas she will take it for what it is and then carry on.
That's why you're a gardener.
So that was the one light anomaly that we saw that was pretty weird. Another one was, I didn't see it, but Lucy did. We were sitting in the living room again, and she said, "Bloody hell!" And she said, "Look at that!" And it was a light, like a tiny little light in the living room. And she jumped off her seat because it spooked her, but it darted from one side of the room through the hall, and it was as if it crashed into the cutlery. You could hear the plates, the crockery. So you could hear the plates in the kitchen being knocked, as if this thing had moved from one room to the next and just went straight through the crockery.
So it definitely had a substance to it and a kick to it.
I mean, I didn't see it, so it's one of those things where I'm just adding it to this, what I'm saying, because it all kind of ties in with the same thing.
Builds up the picture.
And so, again, around about the same time, we'd had music on, we were dancing in the living room, we were prattling about, and it was getting late, and we were chatting to somebody in America at the time. We had the computer on, we were listening to music, we had a mutual friend in America, and we signed off. We said, right, we're going to bed now. And I think it was something like 10 o'clock in the morning there or something like that. And we went to go into the hallway, and we were stopped with these two flashing orbs in the hallway. There was one foot, like about where your foot would be, and then one about eye level. The one by our feet was like a bluish sort of colour. The one by our head height was orange, but they were pulsating like I can't even describe it. It was so fast. The pulsating was so fast. Again, we both saw it. We both just looked at each other and we just thought another anomaly. We just went to bed, didn't question it. And that was the end of that. And it all kind of died down. Everything was put to bed. Nothing else happened. But throughout this whole throughout all the years that I've been researching why I feel that I've seen all these things, I've experienced this, that, and the other. The one thing that I always kept being drawn to was the Bible, not in a religious way, I must add. I did actually do a talk for a pagan group a few weeks ago, and I mentioned the Bible as a disclaimer beforehand, and I said, look, I'm going to be talking about the Bible, and their faces kind of went, and they dropped. So I should have put that in before, but I've put it in now.
It's over.
So, yeah, so
it's over. No, say over 18s. This show, so we can go with that.
So I can swear. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, remember, we're not under regulations of broadcasting, so this is the internet.
Oh, you should have told me before. I've been on best behaviour all this time.
It's a 3-hour show, then.
Oh yeah. So I've always been drawn to the Bible from not a religious point of view, but from a UFO point of view. But there was something in the book of Revelations that I couldn't let go of, and I kept on reading it, and I kept thinking, there's something in me that's telling me to keep reading it. I'll get it. I'll understand it. And I researched the book of Revelations, and and I looked at scholars' accounts of what it was, and it was a story of a guy that was on an island, and he had these crazy visions of 3-headed, 10-horned, 7-headed beasts and all this sort of coming out of the sea. And I thought, what is all this about? This is ridiculous. Why am I reading this? And eventually I got to a point where I thought, do you know what? I want a normal life, because there's a lot of experiences that I know, including myself, whose lives get turned upside down by all this. And you're left constantly questioning reality, constantly questioning people, and asking questions and all this sort of thing. And I thought, right, do you know what? This is really dragging me down. I've had enough of it. I've not got the answers that I want. I've had all these experiences, not interested. And I drew a line metaphorically, and I thought, right, that's it. No more. I want to watch football. I want to play computer games. I want to do laddish things and just be, like an ordinary sort of lad, if you like. Come on. And so I had this in my head. That's what I was going to do. I was going to leave all this UFO stuff behind. And somebody got in touch. I think because I did your show, Neil. Your show, your group, the Paranormal group. I did a talk for you, but it was after that and all these experiences, I thought, that's it. And I spent about 6 months or so deciding that was the end. Didn't want any more to do with reading the Bible and researching UFOs and all that. I was in a customer's garden, getting ready to cut a hedge, and I'd been asked to be a speaker at the UFO Academy in Watford. And I was thinking, do I want to do it? Do I want to be part of this anymore? No. Right, that's it. I don't want to, I'm going to cancel it. They'd asked me and I'd said yes, but I said, I might not do it so I was in a customer's garden ready to cut this hedge, and this orb just flies over my head as fast as you like down the road. And I stood and I just watched it, and I thought, obviously that's a sign to say, you ain't going anywhere. You got to stick at this. And I thought, no, do I want to do it? No, definitely not. No, it's not for me anymore. Anyway, Lucy she used to belong to a book club, and it was all sort of middle class sort of teachers and doctors and journalists and people like that. And all the books they read were very sort of ordinary, what I consider ordinary sort of books, ordinary literature and whatnot. And they'd gone through 20 or 30 books in the time that she'd been there, so a book a month. And I said to her, that's it, I've quit, I'm not interested anymore. I'm not going to do this Watford thing, even though I've seen this other UFO. And she picked me up from work the next day. She said, you said you were going to quit. I said, yeah. She said, you might want to take a look at the book that I've just been given to read. And I said, well, why? And she said, it's called The Midweek Cuckoos. And I said, well, what's that? She said, it's a book about alien abduction. So I thought, right, okay, this is another little sort of push. No let up. So I thought, right, okay, right. So I started almost demanding to know the answer. I thought, right, okay, you're playing around with me. I want to know what's going on. I want to know the answers. And this mission that I felt that I had ever since being a kid kind of came to a head when I was reading Revelations again. I was constantly drawn to the book of Revelations, and it dawned on me that what I was reading was actually a UFO / alien abduction encounter, virtually word for word. And I thought, this can't be right. And I was started to cross. I know I said I wouldn't go into the Bible bit, but I thought I'd tease everyone. So I started researching more and more, and it was as if I was peeling layers of onions back. And it was like one after the other, like another reference, another link. All the things that I'd experienced, all the synchronicities that I'd experienced growing up.
Lee, can I stop you there? I'll tell you why. Is that we're coming. It's gone.
We're
literally are at the end of our program, part 2 now. So.
And on that bombshell.
But you did cross an important part. You did mention the Bible, and we will have to get you back because I know that you've got a lot of information. You have written a book about UFOs and the Bible and experiences in that. It's been a fascinating 2 hours almost listening to your experiences, and I know that we haven't told the whole story. So would you come back?
I've told most of it. So I've told most of it. So there's only little snippets left. But I was going to say, if any of your listeners want to get in touch and chat, Facebook is probably the best place to find me.
And you have a website as well, don't you?
I do have a website, but it's under construction at the moment. It's made and it's not live yet. So
okay.
But my name is spelled Leigh Thatcher. So if anyone wants to,
Thatcher, but we'll have your name in the banner as well. So
yeah.
All right. Can I say thank you very, very much? Andy, any closing thoughts quickly?
Lee, have you got any talks coming up or any other conferences you'll be at as well?
The only I haven't got anything, but not that I can not that I can remember. But I will be doing an actual conference, sort of at home, if you like, where I'm going to record this whole Bible thing from start to finish, because it's about. I was on the radio a couple of years ago, and it took about 6 hours to get through most of it, and there was still another 3 hours to go. So it's a long sort of talk, if you like. So I've got to try and work it out how to condense it and do it in a decent sort of amount of time,
so it's
coherently.
Sandwiches at Lee's house then for his Bible talk. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much, Leigh Thatcher, UFO.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been good.
And thank you very much for taking part. Thank you very much, Andy, for also being with us. And we are on the Paranormal Peep show, not the Paranormal UK radio show, but Andy and I both appear on this, so no wonder we get muddled up. But we're on the Paranormal Peep show, which you can listen to downloads of our shows and catch-ups of previous shows and all the Paranormal UK radio show network shows on Podbean, iTunes and Stitcher. So stay tuned for any other shows in the Paranormal UK radio network. And we'll catch you again next month. But thank you very much indeed to Leigh Thatcher for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you very much. Thank you.